my gosh, guys. I'm almost out of power.
No.
Where the guy gets pregnant with Springtrap's baby.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. Well, I can't say I was expecting that. A Five Nights at Freddy's racing game. A kart racing game, even. And this thing already has a Steam page. It's about as official as you can get. But I still can't stop myself from wondering how the hell we even got here in the first place. I mean, really. How did we go from this to this? And from this to this? And from this to this to this to this? Well, actually, when you put them all back to back like that, it almost makes sense. Almost. And to be completely honest, I'm actually on board for the sillyification of FNAF. The way I see it, if the games are fun and they don't impact the canon, then I really don't see the harm. Not that the canon really even matters to me anymore. You see, FNAF lore, at least in my case, has become this pick and choose adventure, where I draw the line right about there. Yeah, that looks right. And it's not that I don't play the new ones, because I do. I just enjoy them in a different kind of way. And to give credit where it's due, I actually had a lot of fun with Secret of the Mimic. It's a clear improvement from Security Breach and its DLC Ruin. Now, as for 5 Laps at Freddy's, it's just taking me a couple moments to adjust to the whiplash. And actually, now that I've been sitting on this for a couple of minutes, I do remember that there was a teaser for this game. It came out the end of last year, and it was just a single picture. And at the time, we had no idea what it was for. But judging from Lolbit's checkered suit, it's pretty clear it's for 5 Laps at Freddy's. And looky here, this game was made by Click Team. For those of you who aren't in the know, these are the guys who made Click Team Fusion, which is the game engine that all the FNAF games are made in. Except, now they're the ones making a FNAF game, and they're not even using their own engine? Funny how the world works, isn't it? These guys were also responsible for making the console ports of all the original 7 FNAF games. I never played those, so I can't speak to their quality, but Best Buy says it's a 4.8 out of 5, so they're probably pretty decent. Maybe I'll even make a video on that later. Maybe. Anyways, FNAF Kart, or 5 Laps at Freddy's, was initially teased last year in June for the 10th anniversary of the franchise. This ultimately led to a trailer and demo release later that August, and what followed was nearly an entire year of silence. From the very beginning of August all the way to the last day of June for the demo's first ever update. And it was this very same update that actually got me into this game. So all that fluff aside, what did this patch actually bring to the game? Well, for the longest time I had no idea. I went to the Steam forums, but the best I could find was a simple acknowledgement of the update. And after that I took these questions to the internet and pretty much got the same story. Lots of people talking about the game getting an update, but no changelog to be found. And I mean, I really spent like real life hours trying to dig for this stuff. And just when I was about to give up, I finally found it. And it was buried in the strangest place, in the comments section of a Fusion Z gamer video. Boom. Full disclosure, I have no idea who this person is, where they got their information, or even if it's true. But it's all I have. And by God, they completely wooed me with their confidence. So you know what? It's enough for me. And strangely enough, this changelog is tiny. Kinda surprising that this update even stirred up enough buzz in the first place. Though, to be fair, there are a few cool additions that weren't mentioned here. For one, they added really cool character animations and poses for the Racer Select screen, but we'll touch on that later. Secondly, Click Team also added a new vehicle. This one references Trash and Gang. Conceptually, it's pretty cool, but I was never really a big fan of these characters, so it doesn't really do anything for me. Anyways, size of the update be damned, I've already been playing it for several hours, so I think it's time to break down what we're actually working with here. So far, in this demo, we have 8 different racers. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Marionette, Balloon Boy, Mangle, and Springtrap. It's a pretty decently sized roster, and I think they have pretty good picks all around. Aside from that, there are 4 karts. Cup Kart, Midnight Motor, Trash in the Gang, and finally, the Standard Kart. I don't know why they decided to call it the Standard Kart when the art team definitely could have changed it only marginally to make it look like one of the ones from Roxy's Raceway. And then you could at least give it some name that's more thematically fitting. Speaking of, why is she not in this game? She's literally the only FNAF character who has a direct tie to kart racing. It's definitely not a big deal by any means, but it is a little weird, right? Well, besides that, this demo also has 3 maps: Fazbear Hills, Midnight Motorist, and the Sinkhole, each with ascending levels of difficulty. In these maps, you'll also see lots of things that are standard to the kart racing genre. Boost pads, item blocks, and a resource system that gives a passive speed boost. This game's variant being, well, whatever that is. Orange battery juice, I guess? And then there's this game's most unique feature, the night shift. On every map, there is a day shift night shift rotation that lasts about 1 minute and 45 seconds in total. Day shift is a lot of the normal kart racing shenanigans, but when night shift comes around, things get a little bit more intense. You see, the music and the map get all spooky-like. And most importantly, the animatronic comes to chase the players who are leading the pack. If you're in one of the top 3 positions and the animatronic decides to chase you, a small icon will appear above your racer's head. And when this happens, you have 2 choices: outspeed him until he gives up, or hit him with one of the items you can get out of a mystery box. Overall, it's quite the fun mechanic, and is pretty unique to this game. Oh yeah, and there's one more feature. You can jump. It's not really used very often. In fact, it's only used like twice, for a shortcut and a small segment in Midnight Motorist. But you know, it's there, so I figured I'd bring it up. Now with that jump mechanic out of the way, I think that wraps everything up. Well, content-wise, at least. Which means it's finally time for me to talk about what I think of the demo. And, you know, I have a lot to say, but you know what, actually, let's start with the positives. I think the strongest part of this game is how unique it controls compared to the other kart racers it's competing against this year. The turning is incredibly tight, and the amount of time that you have to spend drifting to get a speed boost is quite small. And when you put these 2 factors together, you get an incredibly fast-paced and satisfying gameplay loop. I mean, just look at the gameplay side by side with Mario Kart, and you'll immediately be able to tell that these games play very differently, which in itself is a good thing, because you definitely don't want to compete with Mario Kart. You just can't beat it. The art team also did an excellent job with the character design. The animatronics really look amazing in this art style, and combined with the fun posing, really communicates a lot about their characters without having to say a single word. Take Bonnie for example. His knees are bent, they're turned inwards, and he greets the player with a meek, breezy wave. I mean, just look at him. He's such a cute, sleepy little guy. I mean, either that or he's high as shit. I also really like Springtrap's posing. He's hunched over and scrunched up with his arms crossed. His head is tilted down and angled away slightly to not meet you face to face. Very nefarious looking. I mean, I can't even think of a better pose for a child murderer. And for last is... Oh, Foxy, I didn't see you there. You look so big and strong and pretty and... that was weird, right? Like where did that guy come from, right? Not my basement. Okay, I'm feeling better now. What was he talking about anyways? Right, the characters. Well, I mean, they look amazing, and I hope Click Team adds more for the full release. And I guess those are all the things I like about this demo. Okay. I shouldn't say all, because there are little parts here and there that are well executed upon, but the way I see it, they're just small pieces of a bigger, more middling picture. Let me be clear. I think this game has a lot of potential. It's just being dragged down drastically by its many issues, many of which I think are very fixable before its release date. And as for the rest, they can still be fixed in later updates. Of course, that's if the developers even want to continue updating this game. For all I know, they could very realistically want to move on to other projects after pumping this one out the oven. But the optimist in me, he says otherwise. So why don't we discuss what's wrong with 5 Laps at Freddy's? Now, if I had to sum up all the issues I had with this game, in a single word, I would say that it has a major lack of communication. Now, what does communication mean in this context? Well, it's a game's ability to be understood through visual or auditory design decisions. The goal is to be subtle in order to protect immersion, which can be extremely difficult to pull off in a natural feeling way. A bad example of player communication would be a text box. It's meta, it's boring, and it takes you right out of the game. If you've been around in the gaming community for a couple years now, you've also probably heard of the classic yellow paint debate. Basically, as games kept becoming more realistic, it became much harder for gamers to differentiate between the environment and interactable objects. Here, wait, you know what? Why don't we demonstrate this with a little example? why don't we apply the yellow paint technique to the notoriously confusing Five Nights at Freddy's 1? First off, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know there were buttons. I just played the game without them. So maybe we should start with that. Just a little, like, spray around. There, that doesn't look bad. There's also a door here. It's a little dark, so maybe if we just, like around the hinges of the door. Okay, so now the player can see that there's a door there, even if it's dark. They know it's there. And while we're at it, the HUD elements, they just, I don't know, they don't pop enough. So what if we did a circle? And you know, we could even just do the same thing for the usage rate. I mean, you know, that one's a little bigger than the first one, but I mean, it's fine. That it gets the idea across. And if an animatronic did show up, the player needs to know like where they would be in the doorway. So maybe like a little there. Yeah, that, you know, I was a skeptic at first, but maybe this isn't so bad. I actually think this might be better than the original FNAF. Just tell me what you guys think in the comments. I'm really curious to hear. So as you can see, the yellow paint technique is a flawless and wholly immersive way of teaching the player how to play their game. Now, unfortunately, I don't think every game executes upon the technique as well as I did, but the most important thing is that they tried. And this is where I think Five Laps at Freddy's struggles the most, because there are so many elements of this game that are poorly communicated, which eventually leads to confusing and often frustrating outcomes. I mean, it's even present in the character select screen. You see this bar right here? Well, initially I had no idea what the class bar meant, but as a resident gaming expert, I was eventually able to hypothesize it's a weight class indicator. I do, however, imagine there are many lesser gamers out there who may never figure out what it's for. Now, this mysterious class bar isn't really a big issue because you can play the game just fine without ever thinking about it again. It is, however, pretty telling that this communication problem pops up at the very first moment possible. And what you'll see is that it's even more prominent in its other vague gameplay elements. The power-ups, for example, are something I think exemplify this issue quite well. The magnet power, for instance. When the player uses it, there's no immediate, apparent visual or audio cues that give any sort of feedback, leaving me to question what the hell it did at all. Though, once it was used enough times on me, I was able to figure out that it drains battery from nearby racers. I would, however, really like it if there was a more apparent visual cue aside from the tiny magnet. Maybe some sort of chain of electricity? I'm not really sure. It doesn't have to be exactly that. Just something to better communicate what the item actually does. The same goes for the metal door power-up. You use it, and all you hear is the sound of a metal slam, completely void of any visual stimulus to indicate what just happened. And just like the last item, I was pretty confused when I used it. That was until I used the hide camera feature to see that it spawned a closed FNAF door behind your racer. It would be so much nicer if the character had some sort of animation for turning around and dropping the item behind them, so I could connect the dots easier. And the same goes for all items that are placed behind the racer. They just kind of spawn there. It doesn't look right. And lastly is the mirror power-up. It creates a lot of spiky glass shards around the player, which I initially assumed meant that if I touched other racers, they would spin out and crash. Upon testing that though, nothing happens. I'm assuming at this point that it's a shield, but I haven't been able to test that theory because NPCs don't generally use power-ups all that often, and when they do, there's no warning indicator for when they're thrown at you, so there's no possible way to know when to actually use the item. And on top of that, the spiky glass shards seem to communicate a more aggressive nature rather than a defensive one, which kind of pulls me in the opposite direction of the item's intended use. And as for the rest of the items, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Or at least they have enough visual feedback to inform the player of their function. And while we're still on the topic of items, I should bring up that the bomb has a special issue of its own. And by that, I mean it blows up on you like half the time you use it. And this particularly happens when you're going up hills or when you're going pretty fast. Which, it's a kart racer. That kind of happens all the time. I practically always have to throw the item behind me because if I don't, I'll just end up blowing myself to last place. But even that isn't safe because sometimes it blows up on the racer directly behind you, damaging you both. I guess there are two solutions here. Either make the bomb's damage sphere not last as long, or make the players immune to bombs that they've just thrown. Also, I'm not sure if this is from an item or not, but occasionally while playing, this purple draining effect will appear above your player, and I assume this is from an enemy racer's item? But ultimately, I really don't know what causes it, or even what it does, because I don't feel like I'm going any slower when I'm under its effects. So I don't know, maybe someone's just reaping my aura or something? What? Huh? What do you want? Oh, is this for me? Okay, great. Just go away. Oh, okay. So, I guess the purple aura is a explanation for why you can drive on the wall at certain points. But my brain absolutely did not connect the dots there, like, not even close. I mean, look at this. It looks like a debuff more than anything, right? Is it just me? Well, judging from my experience at least, I would say maybe change up the visual effect, or even just change the color, because a lot of games use purple to communicate weakness, which is why you'll especially see it a lot with poison effects. So something as simple as changing the effect color from purple to blue could actually do a lot to make it more readable. Or maybe I'm just stupid, and I'm the only one out there to actually misread this effect. But anyways, I think that just about wraps up how I feel about the game's item system. Unfortunately though, this communication problem also affects more generalized gameplay. One thing that I really hope changes for the full release is the camera angle, which sits just a little tiny bit too low. This only really becomes a problem in a few specific areas. One that really messes with me is in Fazbear Hills. The turn right here leads up to a hill and then immediately curves left in the opposite direction, and the stupid camera does not help you at all. Multiple times when I was first learning this map, I would come up on this hill and then completely fly out of bounds. And usually when you do that, a short timer will appear and take you back to the map. Yeah, that happens everywhere but this specific corner. And then you're stuck, with no one to save you from the invisible walls. This is also a map design problem. Naturally, the player expects the road to continue turning right as they reach the top of the hill, but it just doesn't do that. And I've had multiple people play this level, and they all do the exact same thing I did. So in this instance, it's actually kind of a mix of a bad camera angle that's too low to see anything, and poor map design. And then there's Midnight Motorist. This map is probably my favorite because of how well it takes advantage of the game's strengths. There's plenty of room for skill expression with all the twists and turns, and this game is definitely at its best when you're constantly drifting and boosting around every corner. It also has a pretty decent track. So props to the composer on this one because they definitely popped off. And you know what? Possum star of approval. I made that just for you, so go ahead and hang it on your wall or something. Now, unfortunately, the track itself has some issues. For starters, there's the night visibility on this map. It seriously needs a glow up. And I mean that literally. It is fucking dark. Like when I was first learning this map, I was legitimately having trouble figuring out where I needed to turn, which obviously is a massive issue for a kart racing game. Darkness aside, this map also has one other issue that really grinds my gears. Kinda like how I want Foxy to grind my... Oh! See, he got out again. Oh. You know what? You got me. So I may have been a little dishonest last time. So you know what? No more lying. That right there is my homunculus twin brother. And I'm gonna be real. I keep him locked in my basement because he kinda makes me feel weird. But you know, I feed him, and he gets water too. And who keeps letting this guy out anyways? Was it you? It was probably him. So now that that's out of the way, in the classic Midnight Motorist minigame, you're driving in a... Huh? I'm sorry, where was I? Oh yeah. Down the highway while trying to dodge incoming traffic. Of course, that fits right into FNAF Kart, so Click Team added a section of the map that works pretty similarly. Unfortunately, it kinda sucks balls. My main issue is how the section is introduced to the player. Here, you know what? Just take a look at this. You see, the map makes you drive across traffic to get to the safer side of the road, but you can't see the approaching drivers from around the corner, so this leaves you completely unable to correctly time your attempt, meaning that whether or not you get hit is almost completely up to chance, which generally feels pretty crappy. I think this section would feel a lot better if the oncoming traffic turned off kind of like this, so then the player could enter the highway driving in the same direction as the traffic, and then make the choice of whether or not to drive against it. Why would the player choose to drive against the traffic, you might ask? Well, when you finally get on the road, the game presents you with two options. You could drive with the traffic for the blue power-ups, or you could drive against it for the orange ones. The orange ones being significantly better because all the blue ones do is increase your maximum boost capacity, which you should never be sitting at max to begin with, so the blue ones are kinda useless. But that's kind of its own issue, and unfortunately the section itself just does not feel good to play. The cars are just so fast and small that it kind of feels janky to maneuver around. Not to mention that whenever you get a power-up or the day-night cycle changes, the HUD completely blocks whatever's in front of your screen. I mean, just look at that. You can't see a damn thing. What am I supposed to do here? There's also a shortcut on the side of the road that acts as a reference to the original minigame. Unfortunately, the angle of the road below the bridge doesn't really match with the angle you drive off of the route from, so you just completely fly off the map and spend several seconds waiting to get picked back up and dropped back on the track. And speaking of poor map design, on this same track, if you take this ramp at the incorrect angle, you'll just fly off the map again. And I'm just so surprised that the devs didn't run into this stuff more when they were playing the game. Though I guess since the developers made the game, they're gonna play it in the way that it was intended to be played. Unlike a new player who takes the ramp at a weird angle because they don't know where it's gonna land, which ultimately leads to unexpected cases like this. Now, all the issues I've talked about this far are with the game's aforementioned lack of communication. I do, however, think this game has a couple more critiques that exist outside of this communication problem. For starters, I think this game feels pretty damn sticky. And by that I mean that there are a ton of things that really slow down the gameplay experience. For starters, whenever you bump into an obstacle, it completely stops you in your tracks, requiring you to reverse and do a full 3-point turn to get around the object, which I think is way too punishing. In these cases, it would be so much nicer if the game simply bounced you back a couple of feet so you could accelerate and drive around whatever stopped you. And to a slightly lesser degree, I feel the same way about player bumping. It's generally not done on purpose, and all it really does is slow down both parties. I don't see why it needs to be so punishing. I think it would make for such a better gameplay experience if they just reduced the penalties for bumping into other players. Also, it feels like you lose so much momentum when you're ramping off objects. I don't know if it's when you take off, or if it's when you land, or maybe it's even both, but it feels so bad. This is primarily felt in the sinkhole because there are a ton of ramps that don't have boost pads on them, so the experience feels so damn slow. Ultimately, I think it would be really nice if they just followed Mario Kart here, and gave you a small speed boost after landing a cool jump. It doesn't even have to be a significant effect or anything. I mean, just a small boost, and it would make that map feel 100 times better to play. I also don't know why the developers gave the monster animatronic a health bar. I understand why they made him vulnerable to items. I mean, he would be incredibly frustrating otherwise. But damaging the animatronic only serves to help the other players in the race by eliminating him before he can chase your opponents, meaning that the best overall play is to try and outrun him until he goes for another racer. None of the NPC racers really even use items on him, at least not much. Like, I think I've seen him lose health maybe 3 times. This effectively reduces his health bar usage to alerting you when he's on the map, which, if that's the only thing it's gonna do, it'd be a lot cooler if they swapped that out with a more interesting UI element, especially one that doesn't block everything in front of you like this. And finally, my last critique of the game, which honestly might be one of my biggest, and it's just that the game looks kind of ugly. And its biggest crime is that it completely lacks consistency across the board. For starters, I think the UI would look a lot cleaner if it distanced itself from the retro text. It clashes with the more rounded, modern-looking elements in the menus and makes everything look so cheap. The incongruent UI continues to be a problem when you finally get in-game. Like, look at this screenshot. You have this smooth, minimalistic battery depiction, a retro clock, this detailed cartoony drawing of Foxy, and your placement ranking at the bottom left that is even more geometrically simple than the battery. None of it feels congruent with each other. The actual rendering of the game is the same story. I think this area in Midnight Motorist says it all. First, look at Bonnie. Very simplistic. Generally speaking, he's just a single consistent color. On his own, he looks great. Very pretty. And then you turn around and you look at Junior's, and it's definitely a decent bit more detailed, but, you know, I'll give it a pass. But then you look down at these photorealistic-ass puddles and their real-time reflections, and don't even get me started on the clouds. Jesus Christ, it feels like I'm looking outside of a window. And you see these inconsistencies all around. Like, look at the wall on the right here compared to how detailed the wall is on the left. It just makes this game feel like it doesn't have an art style. But even if you decided to look past that, the maps themselves are just kind of boring to look at. There's not a lot going on in these tracks, like maybe 1 or 2 set pieces each, with practically nothing in between. I really hope this game gets a makeover before its final release, or I'm gonna be pretty disappointed with it visually. Especially when there's so much interesting source material to pull from. Like, what if we just had maps that were inspired by each of the different pizzeria locations? Each of them looks so vastly different from one another, and they all look super interesting in their own right. But instead of that, we get Fazbear Hills, which is a generic fantasy forest with a farm and some trees and a single outside look at the FNAF 1 location from the movie. Like, aside from the pizzeria location being there at the start of the race, and the stands right next to it being filled with the retro depiction of kids from the minigames, you couldn't even convince me that this is from a FNAF game of all things. I mean, in Fazbear Hills, they use the same billboard 3 times! I mean, it's just a BNG! Okay, it's fine. It's chill. I'm okay. I mean, at the very least, I'll say The Sinkhole and Midnight Motorist do a little bit better in this regard. Not by much, but a little. And if I had to crown a winner, I would probably say The Sinkhole. It definitely fits more of what I'm looking for when it comes to a FNAF kart racing map. So please, Click Team, at least raise the bar to The Sinkhole. Which should be pretty easy, because it's underground. You know what I'm saying? And maybe I went a little overboard back there. Which is why I think we should make this into a compliment sandwich type thing, you know? Gotta start with the compliments, get into the nitty gritty, and then end off with another compliment. And I guess this is all to say, I absolutely love the boost mechanic in this game. You get it from 2 sources, the boost chargers on the ground, and more importantly, from successful drifts. The boost can then be most effectively used during straightaways, or during drifts, which would then negate the slowdown penalty. And this means that you can get boost while you're boosting. It gives you so much more agency because you have this extra resource to manage, not to mention the insane speeds you can get to once you have some practice under your belt. Like, are you even seeing the gameplay behind me? No other game makes me feel like I'm going so fast. Like that right there, that is speed. And this, my friends, is 5 Laps at Freddy's. The demo, at least. The game might be a little rough around the edges, but ultimately I had a lot of fun playing it, and I'm super excited for the full release. Speaking of, when is this game supposed to come out? I'm pretty sure it was supposed to launch by the end of the year, so... Oh, well, I mean, at least they have more time to polish the game up. I mean, we all see that it definitely needs a little bit more love. And you know what's funny is that this video was supposed to come out months ago. I guess we all get a little ahead of ourselves sometimes, don't we? And I guess until that glorious launch day, this possum will just have to wait patiently. And until that magnificent day, I guess I'll just have to say goodbye to you, Foxy. My sweet prince, you and your big, beautiful, captivating,